We are gonna tackle a young Earth creationist TikTok video. But first, I just want you to look at this picture, this panoramic I took while we were in Greenland, while I just say some things here first. First of all, I don't care what you believe, I don't care what your religion is, that's fine. You can have that if you want. More power to you. That's not what I do. I don't bash that stuff. I'm not bashing religion. What I'm doing is I'm bashing false claims. All right. And young Earth creationists are loaded with them. And you're going to see in this video, the young Earth creationist narrative has changed over the past few years with the political landscape. Anything that changes with political flightiness should send up red flags anyway. They used to try to pretend young Earth creationism or creationism in general was science, like with intelligent design and all that stuff. But now they've just kind of seems like they're leaning towards just giving up on that and going to the narrative of education is a synonym for indoctrination. And you're going to see that here. Now, there's an old saying, a lie makes it around the world before the truth even gets its pants on. Now, this video is only 5 minutes I'm going to show you, but I'm going to stop it and whatnot and keep going. And I'm going to try to stay focused on what the topic is, because I can tell you right now this video is going to be significantly longer than that 5 minutes, because it takes a long time to sit there and point out the misinformation and explain the misinformation. It takes 3 seconds to blurt out a slogan or a claim and somebody go, oh yeah, that makes sense, when it doesn't. And then them just absorb it. And we're all prone to this. I'm not saying I'm immune to this or anything. We all do this. I've been duped a few times myself. It happens. But you gotta know the difference between a claim and a fact. You have to know the difference between science and pseudoscience. Now, you guys have heard me talk before many times that arguments, analogies, and antidotes mean two things in science: jack and shit. Okay, arguments are starting points. Okay, that's all they are. They're to get you to think in science. They aren't evidence of anything. They can't be used in lieu of evidence, and they don't become evidence. They're just talk. Analogies are teaching tools. That's why you don't see them in scientific papers, but you see them in scientific textbooks. Analogies are meant to be focused. It's supposed to get you to understand something in the natural world that you may not understand, at least in natural sciences, okay? It's to give you that aha moment. It's not meant to be used as an equivalence and to be extrapolated to the nth degree. Now, I'm not going to go into detail than I have before, but you guys can look at my other videos on this stuff. Antidotes, anybody using that is just full of it. I mean, there's just, yeah. You shouldn't be doing that. Anyway, let's get started on this video. This is from TikTok. I'm going to pause it as we go here. And I did look into this a little bit, or got some slides ready or whatever, internet pages, so you can look at it.
Explain that fossils are not millions of years old. Let's watch it.
If you grew up...
First of all, I just want to say something about millions of years old. Technically, a fossil is just evidence of past life. Now, the definition does go a little more depth. You can read this if you want. This is AI generated from the internet, and you'll see typically more than 10,000 years old. Usually we consider fossils something that has begun the fossilization process, the process of replacing organic material with rock, with minerals, okay? But technically, a fossil is any evidence of past life. Doesn't have to be millions of years old. That I've heard young Earth creationists, they say that over and over and over and over.
Like I did, taught in a state-run school system, you probably have already answered millions of years.
See that there, what they did there? State-run school system. I was taught millions of years. He's setting up that education is indoctrination. He's setting that up right there.
I grew up learning the typical evolutionary story party line regarding rocks.
And he's using, language that he shouldn't be using, party lines and stuff like that. I try not to do that when I'm doing serious videos like this, but I am human too, so I'll let that slide.
In fossils, that slow fossilization ideas were true, and that fossils were millions of years old. I read books with detailed and colorful diagrams showing that fossils formed mostly when animals and or plants died.
Yeah, notice how he's using grade school. Grade school. He's talking about grade school. For those of you that finished grade school and went on to even high school and went to college, you'd know that early education is just meant to give you information. That's why we don't start teaching 8-year-olds integral calculus, okay? We don't start teaching 8-year-olds structural geology, right? They need a basic understanding of something first. And also, I don't know how he was taught in grade school, but any grade school teacher who teaches like this is not a very good grade school teacher. But, I mean, our education system, I'll be short here, is basically set up to dump a bunch of information on you because we realized something during the Industrial Revolution, that you can't have an ignorant populated workforce. They have to have some sort of education. So the quickest way to do that was just dump a bunch of information on them, kick them out the door, and make them enter the workforce. All right? And that's still what we do today. The only time you'll go into depth into how we know what we know, especially in science, is if you take advanced courses in high school or if you go to college. You start to learn the how we know, the why we know. Why do we think this way? But an 8-year-old, we're not going to explain that to. Why would we? That's not something we can take time to do. That's down the road.
In watery environments. I'd typically use the canned example I'd seen and heard so often, a fish. According to the
First of all, he's going to show you idealized fossils. Creationists love doing this. They love showing you perfectly preserved fossils. And I want to say this right off the bat. That is the exception, not the rule. Fossils are rare as it is, which tells you that not everything's been fossilized, but even more rare are perfect preserved fossils.
Typical series of pictures I'd seen depicted in a wide assortment of books. A fish would die, sink to the bottom of a lake, and get slowly covered in layers of silt and mud. As millions of years would pass, the sediment got compressed as new layers gathered. The mud would turn into rock, the fish would become permineralized, and voila, it became a fossil. If I'd just taken a few seconds to think about it, I would have easily realized that what my own eyes observed is that dead fish tend to float and bloat.
Okay, let's get into that a little bit here. Notice we're going back to being a child. Yeah, you see dead fish floating, but when things initially die, vertebrates, things with air in their lungs, what happens is, at first, once that air is gone, they sink to the bottom. All right? That's what happens. Let me see. I just did this little AI generated thing, but I've known this for a long time. Then as it decays the body, what happens is it becomes bloated and it'll float back up. But if something has covered it in the interim, so it can't come back to the surface, it's just going to stay down there. And eventually, once the decay is good enough, where is it? Sorry, it is going to sink to the bottom again. Here's a bunch of whale carcasses on the bottom of the ocean. Okay? Things don't have to float when they die. They can go to the bottom and stay there. Look, there's just tons of pictures of whales on the ocean floor. There's no reason that something dies, it has to float. All right? It's just nonsensical. Yeah. Anyway. Oh, what else did he get into? He got into, textbooks and stuff. Yeah, because, I already got
And the ones that were at the bottom were chewed up by crabs and little nippers quite quickly.
Now, that is true. Things you can even see here. You can see, Oh, yeah, sorry about that. See if I can make this image larger. You can see the little critters eating it. Yeah. How many soft-bodied things do we have? And by the way, this is actually a really good collected skeleton. You want to see what most even bone beds look like? That's not a nice, neat thing. Okay. Here's another picture of a dinosaur scattered around. Crinoids. And here, I even have this. Look at this. I don't know how well you can see it. Let me turn the light on for you. But here, this is crinoid debris. I don't have many fossils because I study the Precambrian, but crinoids don't look like this in life. All right, this is just a debris of it. This one's pretty intact, but they have heads on them, like you see where it says +8. They have heads on them, like this. So, in a lot of the pictures online, people want to show their best specimens. They're not going to show you the junk, but this is rare. People who hunt crinoids know if you find a crinoid head, you got something. Okay, so they're rare to begin with. Most, this is a good preserved, but even it's not perfect. It's missing its feet. They look like plants, but they're technically animals. Okay, so it's just ridiculous. This whole thing, young Earth creationists rely on your ignorance. They're hoping you didn't. Oh, where is that thing? Sorry, where did I put it? They're hoping that you agree with their argument. You just like, oh yeah, because there's a reason why they don't like education. There's a reason why they try to demonize higher education. It's because in general, the more educated you are, in general, there are exceptions. I know people who are exceptions to this. You're not going to buy their bullshit. All right? Because you have enough background to know that this guy is not painting you a complete picture. He's painting you a very childlike pre-introductionary concept of fossilization.
And even the bones didn't last all that long. I realize now that I'd been taught what to think, not how to think.
No, because if you learned ever in your life how to think, you wouldn't have made this video. See, creationists like to see that indoctrination. We have it there. I was told what to think, not how to think, which has nothing to do with the fact he's presenting misinformation.
Most people, even Christians, still believe that it takes millions of years for rocks to form and a living.
Yeah, so it's because most Christians understand science. And rocks don't take millions of years to form either. I could take you to the cliff of the Henry Formation that's in my Geology of Illinois book, where the cliff face is like rock. Henry Formation is glacial outwash from the Quaternary. But if you were to go just a few feet in or get through that layer, it's soft and loose. You can get rocks through chemical calcification processes. That's why we see things like, let's see if I can find it. And then, let's see, Heidelbergensis. I don't know how to spell this. I'm trying to do this in one take. Just so you can see that I'm not in stuff and pulling stuff. So I know I've seen it. It's not. Oh, I think. Oh, here it is. Oh, they say maybe it is a Neanderthal. Okay, you see this? See all this mineralization? This Neanderthal skull is not millions of years old. Okay? It doesn't take that long to precipitate hard minerals on things. That's all I wanted to show you from that, okay? So it doesn't take millions and millions of years for that to happen. There's tufa on the very common on the carbonate rocks in Illinois, in the driftless area, where you'll see tufa, which is where groundwater moves through the cliff face and dissolves that carbonate as it comes through and then redeposits it on the face. If I were to put a quarter there and leave it there for 10, 20 years and no one messed with it, it didn't fall off, it's going to be encased in calcite, okay, and tufa. It didn't take millions of years to do that. You don't need millions of years to create a rock. When lava erupts on the surface in Hawaii and cools, that didn't take millions of years. Creationists are stuck on this concept of uniformitarianism. They like to sit there and say the evolutionists and their uniformitarianism. Uniformitarianism is a 19th century concept, okay? You got to learn to walk before you can run, all right? Back in the late 18th, early 19th century, there was no geology. It's called naturalism, natural science. We were getting our feet wet. We were trying to design methods that matched what we were seeing in the real world, the scientific method and all that, although the scientific method has been around for a long time. It wasn't really applied. Science has grown up, if you will, at least to a degree. I mean, I don't know why you expect science to stay where it was in the 19th century. Science and our concepts and our evaluations and our, explanations are data-based. Data changes with time. We get more of it, and that changes our ideas. Technology increases. We can look at things better or in ways we never did before. When I was a kid, even when I was in college, we didn't have half of the things we have now to look, through bone or anything like that. And our dating techniques are a lot better than they used to be in all this stuff. Science grows up. I mean, that's like expecting an infant to act like a 30-year-old and go to work 9 to 5. I mean, you just don't do stuff like that. Okay? I'm sorry, I'm getting tangenty here, and I don't want to get too much here. Let me get back on track a little bit with what was being said.
Living organism to become a fossil. I realize now that a major reason I never doubted these ideas is that I'd never been shown an alternative for how fossils could have formed.
There's a difference between being shown an alternative and being shown bullshit. Okay? These young Earth creationists will never own up to this, but they're the reason why we have people that think Devil's Tower is a tree stump. Why they think the Earth is flat. Why it's because of this concept that you can wish the world to be how you want it to be because you feel it should be that way. I mean, when you try to confuse science with pseudoscience, people get confused. So they start believing in anything and everything that'll fit their bias or they think is cool. All right. There's a difference between shown in science an alternative hypothesis that can be tested and being shown something that can't be tested, or being shown something that has been tested many, many times and has failed every time, like young Earth creationism. So they just settle arguing and going with the political flow because that's all they have.
I never heard one person in my earlier years ever mention that a giant catastrophe, especially the Great Deluge recorded in the Bible, could have buried creatures rapidly and completely and formed fossils very.
That's because the Bible is a book of faith. It's not a book of science. The evidence doesn't show anything for a great flood. And it's not just, see, he's doing this very focused thing, fossils, not taking into account geology and everything that goes with it, geophysics, structural geology, all that. He's making a grand extrapolation of a global event from 2 or 3 child observations. Now, there are scientists that do this. They're called geochemists. I don't know what it is in geochemistry, but anyway, some of you guys have heard me say that before, but I digress. Let's not get down that road. That the geochemists have this tendency to make global extrapolations off very tiny, isolated areas. But anyway, the picture's bigger, okay? Your flood has to not only fit your little childlike point here, it has to sit there and explain what we observe in geology, in physics, in biology, and in chemistry. If it doesn't, you don't have anything. This is why young earth creationists don't produce testable models, because when they do, they fail. They're falsified like that. They have never produced anything that has withstand scientific testing. And that should tell you something. I mean, what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So this is what they use.
Very quickly, I realized that evolutionary researchers can't explain many things according to that long-age paradigm.
Here we go again. Let me tell you something, dude, about science. Because I did this. Anyway, I said I wasn't going to insult him. Anyway, I don't even know what this guy is. Science can't explain a lot of things. So what? That's not the science doesn't seek absolute truths and absolute truth and proofs. Okay? That's not what science does. Our theories and our hypotheses are descriptions of what we observe and can test or observe, and that can be falsified, or someone can be like, test a hypothesis and be like, oh yeah, that stands up, let's expand on that. And that's what happens when you get a theory. Theories are conglomerations of smaller hypotheses. Usually theories are in such a solid state. See, a scientific theory isn't like young earth creationists use it. It's not a guess. It's not like they use it on on TV and cop shows and stuff like that. Well, I have a theory of what happened. No, that's not it. Theories is high as you can go in science, and they're made up. And most of us work within theories. They're so well established that there's nothing that's ever falsified them. It's easier to falsify the hypotheses within, but the theory stands. And that's how science progresses. We don't know everything. If you ever hear a scientist say he knows everything, he's not a very good scientist, okay? We know we're ignorant. We're ignorant of a lot of things. Of course, this guy gives no examples. He's just making claims. And I don't study evolution because I study the Precambrian. That's another thing. Where does the Precambrian sediments fit into this global flood? And I have yet to see Precambrian sediments have dead fish in them, or any macro life for that matter. Now, I'm excluding the Neoproterozoic talk for another time.
Which is likely why they've more recently begun to embrace and incorporate catastrophic explanations.
Recently. Yeah, if recently is 80 years, young earth creationists are always behind the Powerball or behind the curve on this stuff. They're so far behind. I mean, what's his name? Ken Hovind himself is still using textbooks from the 60s. We've learned so much since the 1960s. Anyway, where was I? My train of thought derailed. No! Well, maybe I can get it back.
Their evolution.
Oh, yeah. See, this is a concept thinking, because younger creationists know he's trying to bash uniformitarianism, which is, like I said, a school of thought. It's not a scientific theory. It's not a scientific hypothesis. It's a school of thought. We used to consider it a theory before we had the scientific method established like we do today, and scientific process and period and all that stuff. But it's a school of thought that basically the processes you see today have been going on for a very long time into the past. Now, we, from a very early time, knew that wasn't the case. Ice ages. The Quaternary Ice Ages, crap. We've known about those. Darwin actually studied those, too. He always gets credit for evolution, but he was big on glaciers, too. And it's 160, 70 years ago? We knew that even that the Earth can change rapidly. Now, glaciers in a human lifespan still take a long time, but we have flash floods. We see those, and we can see what's caused by earthquakes. We can see all this stuff, and we know the deposits that are made and how things associated with this type of events occur. I can take you to places in Wisconsin that show evidence of hurricane rip-ups in the Cambrian strata. I mean, we've known about that for a very long time. Asteroid impacts, meteor impacts, those are more recent, but still we're talking 30, 40 years. Younger creationists just, they like to paint this picture that scientists are following their worldview, are coming to them, are going to get in line with them and coming to their way. And that's not happening. We learn more, okay?
Evolutionary system. Like why they've found fossilized animals in the middle of very specific short-term activities.
This is where he's going to show you the exception and not the rule.
And actions like eating or giving birth. For example, at the Creation Museum in the United States.
Oh, God.
We have a fossil fish displayed that was swallowing another fish while they were buried. Another is the fossil of a horseshoe crab with its tracks visible in the sediment it was traveling along. This indicates that not only was it buried at lightning speed according to the common geological perspective, but that the right chemical conditions in the sediment for rapid fossilization to protect the specimen and its tracks must have been present, eliminating the need for any kind of deep time process to.
What? And where's your evidence for anything you're talking about? The conditions were there. Can you test this? Do you have a hypothesis? Or are you just talking out your ass? I'm going to guess it's the latter. And hold on, just let him go a little more.
Account for the fossilization process. And even more rapidly decaying soft-bodied animals like jellyfish have been found in Australia, Canada, Germany, the United States, and other countries. And this presents.
So, what about fossilization the process says that soft bodies can't be preserved? There's nothing in this process that states that. Did we think a long time ago that fossils, it took a long time for the mineralization to occur? Yeah, because we hadn't observed any of it yet. Okay, but that science advances. My God, young Earth creationism clearly does not. And oh man, it's giving me a headache. I just want to hit my head against a wall or something. See, if you're just seeing this and you have a grade school concept of evolution, you're probably going to entertain this crap. But it's bullshit. I mean, he's not presenting any sort of testable alternative hypotheses. He's just making a bunch of claims. He's saying stuff, not even showing you pictures online. I mean, even I took the time to do that. Tracks in a horseshoe crab, that's fine, but wouldn't your flood be ripping stuff up, tearing through stuff? Okay? And why don't we find primitive huts next to your horseshoe crab? And I don't want to hear they have this concept called fossil sorting, and it's the dumbest thing you'll ever hear. But it's nonsense. And it doesn't address. See, they think mostly if you can get them to press them, they'll think the base of the Cambrian is when their mighty flood occurred. But we know sediments don't get laid down in what we observe through catastrophic. We know how catastrophic flooding affects the landscape. Now, is that exactly the same as if the world were to flood? No, but how did it flood? You don't even say. Some younger creationists say the water got all the way to the top of the mountains. Others say the ocean spilled up upon the land and waved across, and so they don't need more water. That's going to damage stuff and rip stuff up. I mean, they can't even agree on anything because it's nonsense. Not to mention the physics problem of doing that, the friction created, the unloading and loading of extra mass quickly. It's just ridiculous. It violates every law of physics that we believe we know. Now, that's another thing. Laws of physics, they apply. Physics is the basis for everything in the natural world. Everything follows the laws of physics. Do we know all the laws of physics? No, of course not. Do we have a good understanding of the basics? Yeah. Okay. But you can't violate the laws of physics without magic. Okay? You just can't. You can't change the laws of physics or keep the laws of physics as they are with a global flood. The two don't fit. You have to change the laws of physics, and you have zero evidence that that's ever happened.
An incredible conundrum for evolutionary scientists because jellyfish decay so rapidly they typically leave no trace whatsoever after a very short time. Now,
yeah, that's why we see almost none. If there was another thing, if there was this massive global quick flood, we would see stuff everywhere. I mean, everything would have either gotten buried very quickly or torn up very quickly and deposited somewhere else. We don't see any of that. We estimate, I believe it's, what is the, so here, get that off of there. What percentage organisms? Sorry, I should have prepared better. Yes, there we go. Less than 1/10 of 1%. And that's only things of. Have you ever wondered why we don't find fossils of tree-dwelling dinosaurs or mountain-dwelling dinosaurs? You know, deep forest dinosaurs. Yeah, sure, we get some with a little of them, but we don't find mountain-dwelling dinosaurs. I'm sure they existed because things don't fossilize in that environment. You need the proper environment. You can't just sit there and create one out of your ass. Yeah, let's move on.
Now, fossils are typically embedded in rock, which means if the fossilization of an organism occurred rapidly, then the rock they are trapped in must have formed quickly as well. Most of us have been told that it takes millions of years for large portions of strata we see around the world to have formed. How would that explanation fit with the clock in the rock found in Washington, USA in 1975?
I explained that earlier. I forgot he talked about that. That has to do with calcification, and I gave you an example. That's not. Things don't only become fossilized in limestone. All right? We know these processes. It's just like their hammer that they have in the rock, which I pretty much think is a fake. But that clock isn't. That's a thing. See, they just show you a picture and say, oh, clock in a rock. But where was that clock found? Can you take me to where it was found so I can look at the rock? So I can see if there's a bunch of tufa on the wall of a cave or something like that? Just throwing something at you and making a claim about it is evidence of jack and shit. You know, and I've told you guys this before too. I could tell you a story of how I was abducted by aliens on camera. Is that and then post it. Is that evidence? Yeah, it's evidence of me telling a story. Is it evidence of me being abducted by aliens? Of course not. It's ridiculous. People make up stories all the time.
So we know that rocks can form rapidly under the right conditions.
You're just learning that now, homeboy? We've known this for like... what is it? I want to say the first limestone experiments are probably about 120 years, 130 years, something like that. You can fact check me on that if you'd like, because I'm not exactly sure. But we also can do precipitation rates, because, see, you can get carbonate rocks many different ways. Inorganic processes, like from seawater, we have actually done experiments on that, and I think the maximum depositional rate was 6 centimeters in a year that we could do under ideal conditions that the sea never has. But even if the oceans did have that in the experiment, that ideal condition, 6 centimeters a year compared to the Great Carbonate Bank that's literally 20, 30 kilometers thick is not going to happen in 40 days and 40 nights, okay, guy? Or a year after. Okay? Without violating the laws of physics.
When you realize this was a real event, you can understand that the flood would have swept away plants and animals, creating huge amounts of biomass and burying them in waterborne sediments.
Yeah, so where are they? Why aren't these everywhere? Come on, man.
This would mean many were buried en masse, which would have created huge fossil graveyards, of
Notice they're not showing you the actual fossils.
which we find many around the world. The
Yeah. Is that the one I showed you already? Yeah. Fossil, but that's also not the norm. And they don't even occur in the same strata. All right? It's, like I said, show me a fossil bed in the Precambrian. I'll wait. No, I won't.
pit in Germany. Fossils of birds, amphibians, reptiles, insects, fish, and mammals are found in the same place. Not only that, are so
Yeah, because those have existed together for a very long time. I mean, during the age of dinosaurs, you don't hear biologists saying they were just dinosaurs. It's fucking stupid. Yeah, obviously there were insects, and depending on where you are, there were flowers. There was no grass, though, I don't think. But there were flowers, insects, amphibians, mammals, just like today, for Christ's sake, man. I have a hard time with these people. Sorry.
well preserved, they show color, fur, and food in their stomachs. Fossils
Yeah, things can have color. Actually, that insect one I have questions about. That might be under polarized light or something like that, but talks for other times.
have been made in a laboratory in 24 hours, mimicking naturally occurring fossils to a T.
No, they haven't. That's a complete and utter lie. No, they haven't. Not what the fossils he's talking about. I mean, obviously minerals can form quickly. Any kid that's ever grown or had a crystal kit knows that. But no, that's a complete falsehood. He's making that up.
This news was published in a secular article from the University of Bristol called Creating Synthetic Fossils in the Lab Sheds Light on Fossilization Processes.
And that doesn't show what he thinks, what he's claiming it shows. I mean, yeah, I give him credit for citing a source, but that's not what that paper says. That's not what that says. It's not in the context he's using it. And that's another thing they like to do. They like, because they know most people who are going to fall for this aren't going to go read that. And if they do, they might not understand it. See, that's the thing with scientific papers. And I understand the average person's standing off-ish to them, because the way we are, the way we're taught, the way we grow up, is we're talkers. We like to talk. We like to read. We like to read things that flow like we talk. Scientific papers are not written like that. They're technical papers. And if you don't have the necessary background, you're not going to understand it. You're going to get frustrated and throw it away and say, hey, this guy's simple. I'm a simple-minded person, so he must be right. Just because you don't understand something doesn't mean it's wrong. Okay? I know scientific papers can be hard to read, but they're just there to worry about what they're trying to show you in that paper. They're not meant to teach you the entire, from grade school biology all the way to detailed evolutionary, genetics and stuff like that. Sorry, I'm not a foot, so if I'm misusing things, I'm sorry. I mean, I should use geology analogies, Yeah, okay, we'll use a geology analogy. All right. Scientific papers, like in geology, some of them the average person could probably understand, but like structural papers and stuff, the average person's not going to know what the hell's going on. But they're not there to teach you from Geology 101 when you're licking rocks to see if they're salt, to complex geological modeling in the subsurface using data collected at the surface. That's not what they're for. They're not there to teach you what you never learned. All right? Those things would be the size of books if you did. And that's why young Earth creationist papers that claim to be science are 90, 100, 200 pages long, because they know their reader has no clue what they're talking about. But that doesn't mean it's right.
which mentions that the experimental samples, or what they refer to as synthetic fossils, are compared to real fossils, supposedly thousands or millions of years old, and they were basically
Oh, now we've gone down to thousands of years. Oh, okay.
identical, not just visually, but also microscopically, as revealed using a scanning electron microscope.
Getting into that paper, I've actually read what he's talking about, and it's a little bit beyond me too. But we're not going to get into that here. Just he's misrepresenting it. Let's just say that. Go ahead and read it if you want. And hopefully, if you can understand it, you'll see how he's misrepresenting it.
Scientists even found that just as in the naturally occurring fossils, the 24-hour fossils contain preserved microscopic pigment-bearing structures called melanosomes that reside within the organic films in feathers and lizards treated, while unstable protein and fatty tissues degrade and are lost.
So, what does that have to do with a global flood 4,500 years ago? Nothing.
This experiment, accomplished using a hydraulic press, shows that under the right conditions, fossils can form very rapidly.
Finally, that's over. I'm sorry, guys. I took so long to go through this with you. But I'm going to post this uncut with all my errors, just so you can see it. Yeah, I plan on doing more detailed stuff, which will be edited. And hopefully won't be so long-winded, but I'm going to ask you to become a member of my channel for that. Don't forget, I do have stuff to sell. I have Smirk. You can look there. I also have merchandise on Redbubble and on Printify under Ezra's Trinkets. So, yeah. Anyway, let me know if you have any questions or comments, and have a good day.